Your Business Podcast with Frank Furness.
Well, hi everybody and welcome to Sales School, and this is Frank Furness, where we're going to help you make more money by mastering sales, dominating marketing, and really being happy. In our next episodes, we're going to be taking a look at the psychology of sales, and I'm going to be joined by my really good friend Ian Halsall, where we speak about Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Okay, Ian, now let's talk about body language, because before NLP, when I first started in sales many years ago, they said, watch what the client is doing. If they cross their legs, you cross your legs. If they sit forward, you sit forward. But I think there's a lot more to it than that, because a lot of the times they say you just got to match what the client is doing, speak slowly or speak quickly. Tell me a little bit more about body language and how it can really affect the sale.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the first thing to say about body language is that it is really, really important. Just to put some numbers to this, there's two pieces of classical work that was done many years ago. First was by Dr. Alfred Morabian, 1967 in the University in California. And secondly, 1971, Dr. Ray Birdwhistle, University of Pennsylvania. And they said that it's kind of interesting because they use very different ways of measuring the effect of body language, and both of them came up with exactly the same result. Namely, that communication is by three channels. There's the words, like I'm saying now. The words are what the words are, whether I say them loudly, say them quietly, or email them to you, the words are the words. Secondly, there's the tone of voice, whether I'm talking very, very quickly or very, very slowly, with a high pitch or a low pitch, all those kind of things, and also putting humour and intonation and inflection in the words. And thirdly, there's body language, and that's everything from the top of your head to the tip of your toe, eye movements, facial expressions, body posture. And both Morabian and Birdwhistle came up with the same three numbers, which I'm sure you know, Frank, that body language is 55% of the message received. Voice tonality and voice quality is 38% of the message received, and that leaves a whopping massive 7% for the actual words. Now, there's a bit of debate as to whether it's exactly 7% or not, but that doesn't matter. The important point is there's a lot going on besides the word. And when you think about it, this makes sense in sales. Every time I give sales trainings to a bunch of salespeople, I always ask them, do you have the 80-20 ratio going here? You've got 100 salespeople, 50 salespeople. How many hot shots do you get? Answer, not many. And usually you get the ratio of 80-20. 80% of your sales comes from 20% of your performers. You normally have in a group of salespeople a tiny fraction of people who are hot shots, rainmakers, whatever you want to call them, and they deliver a lot of sales, and they get to become, if it's financial services, $1 million round table or top table like yourself, Frank, and being very, very highly regarded and very highly paid. Now think about it for a moment. Why is that? What's going on that makes those top performers perform as well as they are? Well, have they got the same product? Yeah. Have they got the same price as everyone else? Yeah. Are they operating in the same economy as everyone else? Yeah. So what's the difference? What they're saying is that the 7% is the same for all of them. The words, the prices, the product, they often have the same company brochures and all of this stuff. What makes the difference is the voice tonality, the persuasiveness, friendliness, authoritativeness, credibility, whatever it is that transmits in the voice is coming across, and, of course, body language. So the first thing to understand is that body language is very, very important, and voice tonality is very important, particularly for those of you listening to this program who do work on the telephone. If you're doing work on the telesales, then all of a sudden forget the 55. You've now got 38 out of the 45, whatever that number is. I think it's 80% or so of your message is your voice tonality, your voice quality, your voice speed, your inflection, your intonation. Very, very important. Coming back to what you were asking about, Frank, with body language, firstly, I just want to clear up a few things. I hate to say it, but there are NLP books and products in the market which say, if you want to build rapport, match and mirror. Well, I've got one thing to say about that. You try it. Sometimes matching and mirroring will help. Sometimes. And sometimes matching and mirroring will not help. So bottom line, you've got to be smarter than that. Earlier when we were talking about this program, we talked about prescriptive versus non-prescriptive ideas, and this is really important if you want to grow your sales. Prescriptive means you just have one approach or one script or one way of talking. Non-prescriptive is you respond depending on what the other person is talking about or doing. The same applies to matching and mirroring. Sometimes matching and mirroring will help. Sometimes it will not. There's a word that isn't talked about often enough, and that's overmatching, where you're matching too many movements. So, first of all, I'll define my terms. I just want to clarify what the difference is, first of all, between matching and mirroring. Matching is quite simply, you do what the other person does. They fold their arms, you fold your arms. They cross their legs, you cross their legs. They lean forward, you lean forward. You make eye contact, they make eye contact. Now, there's a lot in that, and often, if not the majority of the time, doing that will build rapport. What's the difference between matching and mirroring? It's very simple. Mirroring means that you're with somebody and it's like as if there's a big mirror. So a big mirror between you and them. So just to explain that, if you're matching somebody, they fold their arms, they put their right arm over their left, you match them, you put your right arm over your left. But if you mirror them, you're putting your left arm over your right. So you are becoming a mirror image.
Ian, is there a difference between the matching and the mirroring? Is there a big difference, and what are the differences? How will it affect the sale?
There is a difference. The difference is that it alters the state of the prospect to a different degree. If you think about it for a moment, where do you come across mirroring in your everyday life? Because there's one time you come across it, and the person listening to this now would be getting the same. You come across mirroring when you're looking at yourself in a mirror. And that tends to have a certain type of fixated state. You're normally doing something like, for the guys, shaving, for the ladies, putting on makeup. And looking into the mirror, looking into your own eyes, does have a certain effect on your state. You get that when you're mirroring. Now, if somebody mirrors you, you'll be triggering off. We'll be talking about anchors later on. But it becomes a visual anchor to go into that state, which tends to be an unusually receptive state, which you don't always want, by the way. So, state of receptivity is something that you want to manage, the same as you want to manage any other state.
Does this mean maybe if you're too comfortable, you're not going to fire them up to buy?
It can actually do the opposite. You can have them too fired up to buy, and they can start agreeing to things before they're filling their convincers. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but if some NLP techniques are so powerful that you can have people buying something that they're not 100% comfortable with.
And then they have buyer's remorse and cancellations.
Right, and then they have buyer's remorse. You see, NLP, one of the reasons I find NLP really useful is because it can avoid buyer's remorse. So many salespeople, they're so focused on pitching, closing, that they forget that sometimes that if you close a sale when the client isn't ready to buy, then the next day they've calmed down, their state has changed, as you would say in NLP, and then they go, whoa, hold on a second. I agreed to something before I was ready. What's this guy trying to pull?
Don't you think a lot of the times they're trying to sell a product there rather than a solution? If you're selling a solution, you're on the same wavelength. It's a win-win for both of you.
Absolutely right, because if you're focusing on the solution, you're focusing on the prospect's needs. But if you're just trying to sell them something, the chances are you're not building the rapport properly, you're not taking the preventative measures to avoid buyer's remorse. And buyer's remorse isn't talked about enough. Because if you're a salesperson who's going to be generating referrals, which we'll get onto when we talk about networking, you absolutely have to have a great reputation. Because people aren't going to be making referrals and recommending you to their friends if your reputation isn't impeccable, you're dealing with congruency, and you have high levels of integrity. So you've got to make sure that you don't have buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse is where somebody will think, uh-oh, what happened? Was I manipulated? Was I cajoled? Was I bullied? What was going on? Was some trick being used? So you've got to make sure that you do, in the presentation, deal with buyer's remorse so that it doesn't even occur.
So now let's get straight back to this body language. Now, when we speak about body language, I want to speak about what are some of the buying signals, because they say you can watch for the eyes sparkling, they're sitting forward, hands open, almost going back to the old days saying, I come with no weapons, my hands are open, and even down to the handshake when you meet somebody and you shake their hand. Because, I come from South Africa originally, and when two South African men meet, it's let's see who can crush the other one's hand. And you sit there smiling at each other, and you're trying to crush the hand, and the blood vessels are almost bursting, but you're smiling at each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, something happened to me. I'd really got into this whole thing about the whole hard handshake, and I went to go and see a top woman executive. I walked in, and without thinking, I nearly crushed her hand. Well, 2 minutes later, I was out of there, and I lost maybe one of the biggest sales ever, because I wasn't thinking. I'd gone doing the things that I'd always done instead of changing the way that I'd done things. So let's think about what are some of the things, what are some of the buying signals? What should our handshake be like? What about eye contact? What should that be like? Tell us a little bit about that, Ian.
Thank you for asking. Before I answer your question, I just want to say that I've got no idea how many millions, if not billions, are lost because salespeople don't understand this properly. Talk to me for a moment, Frank. When do you make a decision about somebody, or how quickly? If it's a job interview, a sales presentation, you say hi, how quickly do people start to form an opinion?
I reckon in the first 20 seconds.
I think you'd be about right. Depending on which book you read on psychology, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, some say 60 seconds, but whichever book you read, not very long. When do the following three things happen? The smile, the eye contact, and the handshake.
First 20, 30 seconds.
Absolutely right. So you got this little window where people are probably going to decide whether they're going to buy or not, and you're going to be doing these three things. Now, what's the golden rule in NLP and building rapport? You want the other person to be thinking, preferably unconsciously, but somewhere in their mind thinking, I like you, and one of the biggest reasons I like you is because you're kind of like me. You remind me of me, and that makes me feel comfortable, like as if I'm looking in a mirror. So, matching is useful. Matching and mirroring do help. Now, if I offer you a mid-grip handshake and you give me the crusher...
We're not matching each other.
We're big-time mismatching. I'm doing a medium grip, you're doing a crusher grip, and even in the first formative few seconds of me forming an opinion, I'm getting this literally painful screaming at me, we're different.
You might even be getting the signal, this is some dominant guy who's going to go in for the quick sell, he's trying to dominate me.
Yep.
I'm thinking, this is a wimp, I'm going to crush his hand over here, let's go for the quick kill. There's no win-win.
Yep. So that's handshakes, and it's dead easy to get right. Secondly, eye contact.
In fact, let's just go back to the handshakes. If we want to get the handshakes right, shouldn't you just match the grip of the other person?
That's it.
So it's that
That's
easy.
That's
just
it.
Match the grip of the other person.
You will know, I mean, you might want to practice a few times, but you will know within microseconds as to what kind of grip you're going. And it'll gradually, people don't do a grip instantaneously. It takes a second or two to get the grip, and you shake hands. You'll know if you're dealing with a fella, and sometimes it is a fella who's got the, dishcloth kind of handshake, so you do a softer grip. You'll know quite quickly. Ladies, often they have a lighter grip, so you'll know it's coming. And if the guy's one of these good old rugged South African type blokes, then okay, you match him. And unconsciously, now chances are he's not even thinking about it. With his conscious mind, he's thinking, what's going on? Do I want the product? Who is this guy? So all of this is happening unconsciously, but it's going in. So yeah.
Great. And then what about the eye contact?
I know, this is another one. Now, especially for me, being a typical sort of Brit, and most of my business is Asian, guess what? You've got a massive difference in culture, in the approach to eye contact. So, eye contact, if somebody is a low eye contact person, they make, say, 20% of their time making eye contact, and the other 80% looking around or looking at their feet, and you give them the full-on stare, what are you doing? Matching or mismatching?
Oh, you're mismatching there. They're going to feel very uncomfortable.
You're mismatching big time. So it's back to this thing again of being prescriptive versus non-prescriptive. Should you make eye contact? Well, if you're prescriptive, and there's lots of sales books that will say this, which, frankly, they worked a few years ago, and I guess if you're going to err either way, I'd say err on a bit more eye contact than a bit less. But guess what? There are some people who don't like it. And it comes back to this thing that you said earlier, Frank, sell to people the way they want to be sold. So if they're giving you a loud signal, I don't like a lot of eye contact. I find it threatening. I find it intimidating. And you give them a lot of eye contact, you've blown the sale in the first 20 seconds.
What are some of the other closing signals? So we're going to speak about closes in a while, but some of the body language that you're really getting on the rapport is good. A lot of the time it's good eye contact.
Yeah.
Maybe shifting some of the books away from the table, opening up space, inviting you to a round table or sitting at a couch. Well, because what they're really saying is, I like you, I feel comfortable with you, let's move away from this real business type of position. Or you could be with a person that just says, I want to get right down to business. Don't mess with me. Let's just do it.
Yeah, and you'll know pretty quickly if you're with somebody who's like that, because you'll be saying, I'm trying to think how they might start the conversation. They might come into your office and say, right, I want to know this, I want to know this, I want to know your pricing. And you just match them. You talk in the same tone of voice. You talk at the same kind of velocity. You say, okay, Bill, okay, if that's what you want, we can do this, we can do this. Would that be okay for you? And you match and you match. If it's eye contact, if it's the handshake, those are real quick. You'll know those straight away. Voice tonality. This is really important. Have you ever been selling to somebody who talks a little bit calmly, a little bit slowly?
Oh, and me, I'm so energetic and so full of enthusiasm. I've got to change. Otherwise, they're going to think, who's this maniac coming in here?
And if I talk to you and I kind of stop halfway through the sentence and I'm kind of mulling over the next thing I
say, whoa, come on, talk to me, talk to me.
So I'm doing the pauses and you're bouncing off the walls, So is this matching or is this mismatching?
Mismatching big time.
And are we going to have more rapport? Well, I need a little bit of time, and it might happen mid-sentence. And if you're a high-energy, pushy salesperson, you don't give them the time. And so what you're doing is, now consciously, we're back to the unconscious and the conscious. Consciously, they're thinking, who is this guy? Unconsciously, they're going, I like to pause, you don't give me the pauses. I like to talk slowly, you like to talk fast. We're mismatching, therefore I feel uncomfortable. Then that's not in their awareness, but that's at a deep level, that's what's going on inside of them.
They're saying, you're not my kind of person. I don't really feel comfortable with you. I'd rather buy from somebody that's like me.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I was in Kuala Lumpur, and one of the biggest national newspapers, the reporter came up to me to do an article on me, and he said, I've heard about NLP, Ian, I've heard about you. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm teaching a bunch of salespeople. And this reporter, he rolled his eyes and he said, oh, I don't like salespeople. And I said, really? That's interesting. Why don't you like salespeople? That phony smile, that glaring at you eye contact, and that kind of high-energy, pushy stuff. I don't like that. And I'm going, now that's interesting, because there are sales trainings that say smile, eye contact, firm handshake, high-energy enthusiasm. Should you sell that way? Well, if you've got a prospect who loves that, absolutely. But if you have a prospect like the newspaper reporter I just mentioned, then you change gear, because he's giving you the sign like, hey, I don't like that. So you just slow down, say, so what kind of things are you interested in?
Even I sell to a lot of sort of detailed, analytically type of people.
Absolutely.
Although I'm not like that. I'm very high energy.
Yeah.
But what I do is I give them an overabundance of information.
Yep.
And I let them take away and study in their own time, and they will come back and make a decision. I can't close those people.
Yep.
They will buy rather than me selling to them.
Absolutely, and they're giving you clues all the time they're talking, and most salespeople, their eyes are half shut and their ears are half closed, because if the guy's quoting you numbers, and often this happens before the sales presentation, that's really important. If you say to somebody, how was your weekend? And he says something like, yeah, I had a really great game of golf, I managed to do 2 under par. That's 2.47 moving average over the past 4 months. Then he's saying, wow, this is a real analytical, detailed, statistical type person. And you're talking about a golf game. You could talk about, oh, by the way, and they'll often give clues as to whether they're very visual, very auditory, or very kinesthetic at the same time. And you just listen, pay attention, and it's all there, right in front of you.
So they might be saying things like, tell me about your company, Frank, or show me some of the statistics, show me your product. And straight away, you've got to be listening, so you really got to be in the zone all the time.
Yeah, and the thing is, if it's words like, well, just to quickly recap them, visual people would use words like show, look, colours, blue, yellow, green. Colours don't work in anything other than visual things. Auditory people, they generally, and this is a useful tip, it's not 100% accurate, but auditory people talk a bit slower. So auditory people will use words like, do you hear what I'm saying? Does this sound right? And kinesthetic people, mostly, not always, but mostly talk a little bit slower still, because if you're a very kinesthetic person, you tend to check in with your feelings a bit, and feelings tend to get processed a little bit slower in the brain than pictures do. And of course, kinesthetic people would use words like, I just don't feel that I can make a decision today, or I'm just trying to get a grip on where I want to be, so I don't have that feeling that I'm being pressured. If they're saying those kind of words, then you've got to use those kinesthetic type words back to them. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Being attentive to all the clues. Every time you're with a prospect, in fact, you could even generalize that every minute and every second you're with a prospect, they're giving you information. Talk to me like this, not like that, like this. If you talk to me like this, I'll buy. You talk to me like that, I won't buy.
Right, so Ian, if we have to summarize the body language side of it here, is you've really got to be aware. You've got to be in the zone all the time. You've got to be watching for those little signals. You've got to be matching them. You've got to be listening to the words they're using. There's everything that you've got to take into consideration right in those first 20 to 30 seconds and then going right throughout the interview. Would that be right?
Well, that's the ideal, but of course people listening to this program now will be going, whoa, hold on a second. How on earth am I going to be listening to all of those words, paying attention to all of those movements at the same time as listening to what the guy says? So this is why NLP puts a lot of focus on the unconscious mind. Trust your unconscious mind. Once you do NLP trainings, obviously I'd like people to do them with me, but whoever you do an NLP training with that actually helps you to get good at these techniques, you will be amazed at how much of it you can do unconsciously once you've been trained. A little bit like driving a car. You know, the first time you drive a car, you've got to consciously think about the brakes, the accelerator, the gear stick, and all of these things. Using NLP techniques in selling, it's amazing just how much you'll find. People who I've trained, one of my favorite bits of feedback is they say, my closing ratios have gone up, my income's gone up, I'm closing deals like I've never done before, and I'm not entirely sure I know exactly what I'm doing all the time. I say, that's fine, because once you become intellectually aware of it, it's amazing just how much of it changes just on its own.
Right, so the next time you're going in to see somebody, just take a little bit of time out before you actually go in there and just think about some of the things that you've got to be aware of. Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And remember, if you'd like to book me to speak at your next conference or do some sales training, either in person or via Zoom remotely, please drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Also, please take a look at my website, frankfurness.com, and take a look at some of my courses on productivitycenter.com. Remember also to connect with me on all of the social media channels. They're all under Frank Furness, especially LinkedIn, where I'm almost up to 30,000. And every day I have some great new ideas and tips on sales, marketing, speaking, and anything that will make you money. Hey, this is Frank. See you in the next episode.